Hello and welcome back to Just Meg Elise, a podcast about healing, remembering who you are, and diving into deeper alignment. I'm Meg, and I'll be your host. So during today's episode, I'm going to talk about, or actually pose a question, can we truly love ourselves if we're still addicted to being chosen or to being accepted by others? I've been on a self-love journey for a while now. One thing that really helped me on that journey has been mirror work. I've talked about that in previous episodes, mirror work or mirror therapy as it can sometimes be referred to. So go listen to that episode if you're interested in that. But it's still always a journey, right? But it's just something I started thinking about. Can we truly and do we truly love ourselves if we're still asking others, choose me, love me, accept me, and possibly bending and shaping who we are based on what we assume other people want from us. You know what I mean? So it's just something to ponder and something I wanted to talk about today. Essentially, what happens when the love for yourself is dependent on being chosen or accepted by somebody else. Because needing to be chosen is often a wound in disguise. And this isn't about shame. It's just about seeing yourself more clearly and reclaiming the truth. So first, what does it mean to be addicted to being chosen or addicted to external validation? It really just means that your sense of self or your sense of self-worth is based on external approval, whether your partner, your family, your friend, or even strangers online, whether they approve of you. And you only feel valuable if someone else sees you as valuable, instead of rooting for yourself from within. You're constantly scanning for external validation, which is outside of yourself. And it's never going to give you the true self-love that you're needing. The love that you're seeking, it has to come from inside you first. Then love from others can just be icing on top of that cake. But it has to come from inside you first, because if you don't believe it, no amount of external validation is going to make you believe it. It might have a false sense of making you believe that, but it has to come from within first. So how do we get this way when we're seeking external validation? I think definitely the rise of social media and the validation cycles of that, like seeking likes, seeking comments, seeking, are people watching? Are people engaging? Am I important enough for people to look at? Am I important enough for people to listen to? That sort of thing. Those sort of thoughts come up with the amount of social media that we participate in nowadays. Also, maybe it came from childhood dynamics where you felt like you needed to perform in order to feel loved, or it could come from codependent or anxious attachment patterns, or that you at one point built your identity through the eyes of another, whether it was through the eyes of your parents or through the eyes of your partner or through the eyes of your family, whatever it was. And we're carrying that mechanism forward into our life, still seeking approval from others in order to feel loved when it can't come from them. It has to come from within. And because it keeps us disconnected from our true self-love. And it becomes conditional. Our love for self becomes conditional when we are addicted to being chosen or accepted by others. So I just wanted to share a quick story of thinking back on my own life. I actually have two where this happened to me, where I was seeking external validation and kind of how I overcame that. So one example that comes to mind is a relationship that I had previously where he cheated on me, I believe multiple times. It was never confirmed, but I believe it did happen multiple times. And even during that relationship, I still was seeking his approval, seeking his validation, and seeking to be I should be good enough for you. I should be enough for you to stay, that sort of thing, when I should have just walked away. It was his own shit that he needed to deal with. It had nothing to do with me. A lot of times when partners cheat, it has nothing to do with you, and it has to do with their own insecurities. They don't feel good enough to be with somebody else. This is not an excuse for them at all, but it's they don't feel good enough to be with this one person, so they self-sabotage by cheating. That can be one of the reasons that they cheat. There's a multitude of reasons why people cheat, but I feel a lot of times, most of the time, it has nothing to do with their partner, and it has everything to do with them and what's going on internally with them. It does not make it okay. Cheating is never okay. It often has nothing to do with their partner and everything to do with that own person and what's going on internally with them. And this was also why while he was actively emotionally abusing me, and I stayed, and looking back, it was a lack of self-confidence in myself. It was anxious attachment. It was definitely seeking validation from others. It was my early 20s, and I just didn't have the amount of self-love that I have now to say to myself, this is not right for you, Megan. This person does not treat you well. You need to walk away. I didn't have that mechanism inside me yet, and I didn't have the ability to say yet and to myself, I am lovable regardless of what he thinks of me, regardless of whatever partner thinks of me, what my family thinks of me, what my friends think of me. I am lovable regardless of that. And that inner voice, it comes with time as we begin to build our own self-love. But definitely back then, I was like seeking, why don't you love me? Maybe if I put in more effort, he'll love me more. Maybe if I'll put in more effort, he'll stop cheating, And I think too, I was like pushing aside the fact that I believed he was cheating and kept telling myself, no, that's not happening. That's not happening. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that to me. But some of the things that helped and have helped years later too, looking back on that situation, was naming that I wasn't rejected. I was set free from a dynamic that did not feel safe. I was a great partner in that relationship. I went above and beyond for him, so I know it wasn't me. So I wasn't being rejected. He was honestly probably rejecting a part of himself and self-sabotaging, which that's not on me. That's something he needs to work out in therapy. But it set me free from my dynamic where I didn't feel safe. I was being emotionally abused. Some would even argue physically abused, even though he never hit me. There was like things, driving really recklessly with me in the car and just different things that some argue is physical abuse, and like breaking things near me to like make himself seem whatever. And another thing was years later, some mirror work, standing in front of the mirror and saying, I choose myself regardless of who else chooses me. I choose you. Looking at myself in the eyes and saying, I choose you. Regardless if anybody else chooses you, I choose you. And I love you. And you are worthy and whole and enough exactly as you are. And starting to tell those things to yourself, because eventually you will start to believe them. And then you will act accordingly with people in your life who do not treat you based on the worth that you know that you have. And I also wrote down everything that I compromised and accepted in that relationship in order to stay in that relationship and like stay chosen, and grieving it and crying over it and apologizing to myself and allowing that shame die and allowing that memory to die and telling myself, it's okay. I love you. Like, we are going to choose better for ourselves next time. And another example would be, like, let's say, again, back to that social media example, let's say I posted something and I noticed that my self-worth or feelings of self-worth were coming up if that post or that photo, video, whatever, wasn't getting any traction, wasn't getting any likes, nobody was watching it, etc. Thoughts of like, oh wow, am I not worthy of being heard? Did I not do a good job? Those sort of thoughts start to come up. And so what I've started doing is I log off. It doesn't matter how many likes it get. Would I still put it forth even if nobody saw it? Yes, because I find value in it and I think others will too. So what does it matter how many likes it gets? And it's not basing our self-worth based on, again, external validation. And it's slowly building that practice of creating wholeness within ourselves instead of hunger for what's outside. And external validation too is often tied to the fawning response, like especially in trauma survivors. So to just explain it quickly, if you don't know what the fawning response is, fawning is a trauma response where we try and keep ourselves safe by people-pleasing, over-apologizing, and abandoning our own needs in favor of what somebody else needs to avoid conflict. And again, that's why this is very common in trauma survivors, because maybe a parent, a caregiver, a teacher, family member, sibling, whatever, often they felt very unsafe in their presence, so that person learned to adapt. They learned to speak to them calmly, to people please. What is it that you need? What is it that I can do for you? Over apologizing for things that they didn't even do wrong and abandoning their own needs in order to stay safe. That is understandable why you picked up that mechanism. If you have those mechanisms, it's understandable. But then we're carrying those mechanisms with us into adulthood when we don't need them anymore. And we're still people pleasing and we're still over apologizing and we're still abandoning our own needs when we have to learn to heal that now. We have to learn to heal that now. It is not your fault that it took place in the first place, but now that we're adults, we have to learn to try and heal that and heal our nervous system and tell ourselves, I don't need to people please. I can still be loving and kind and honest and not be a people pleaser. I don't need to over apologize for my needs, and I don't need to abandon my own needs in favor of the needs of others. Yes, we can acknowledge and try and provide our partners, our families, our friends, our children to try and fulfill their needs, but their needs should not take precedent over your own needs. That's where it changes. You're allowed to see both sides. You're allowed to want things for your loved ones, want to fulfill their needs, etc. But those things should not override your own. It's the fawning response is, how can I make everybody else happy while ignoring what makes me happy? How can I make everybody else okay and solid and good while ignoring myself? And being chosen, being accepted, whatever, it can feel regulating in the short term, but it's dysregulating in the long term. Self-love and accepting ourselves and not needing that external validation, it in itself is a form of nervous system practice. It's telling ourselves, I do not need that other person's validation to know my worth. And how do you begin to cultivate that worth in yourself? One of the great things that I think really helps, again, is mirror work. Looking at yourself in the mirror every day, looking in your own eyes and telling yourself, I love you. I love you. I'm here for you. I'm proud of you. You are enough. You are worthy. You are valid. Telling yourself those things every single day. And I promise you, over time, you will begin to believe it. And you won't need the external validation of others to make yourself feel loved, because that love is going to come from internally. So you guys know I love journaling prompts. So I wrote down some prompts to kind of dive into this a little bit deeper with you guys. So here's the first one. Where in my life have I been waiting to be chosen? Is it relationships, work, family, social media? Exploring all of those ideas and all of those layers. Okay, here's another. What version of myself have I been abandoning in order to be accepted? Inviting honesty around masking. Where have I been masking? Where have I been shrinking? Where have I been people pleasing? Here's another. Whose opinions am I giving too much power and why? Naming those external validations and why they are controlling your self-worth. Why am I letting them, right? Can we release some of that? Here's another. What would I change if I chose me first? If I made me the most important person in my life? This is not selfish. This is not selfish. It's self-love. What would change if I put me first for once and focused on what are my needs and fulfilling those needs first? Here's another. When was the first time I felt like I had to earn love or attention? So sometimes this can guide us back to the origin of that wound. And what does being chosen by me, by myself, what would that feel like or look like? So what would that look like? Would it look like more of saying no to things that don't align for you? Would it mean setting more boundaries, more healthy boundaries? Would it mean taking more time for yourself, taking more time for rest, asking yourself, what do I want to do today? What do I want to cook myself? What do I need? Asking more of those questions instead of what do people around me need? Or what do people... Here's another thing. This is something we sometimes ask ourselves, even if it's subconscious. It's like, how can I behave in order to get this person to love me, to get this person to accept me, etc. And letting go of that and just behaving authentically. And do they still love me after that? And then taking note of that. Do they still treat me with respect when I act authentically? That's information to you, because if they don't, that's something to take note of. If you're not fawning, if you're not people pleasing, if you're not over giving all of the time, and then that person withdraws their love or affection, that is information to you. That might not be a safe person for you, So beginning to love ourselves. Oh, here's another big thing. As we begin to love ourselves, you are going to realize the people in your life where you do have to perform to be loved by them. And those are not your people. I have so many, this is hard for me to say, but I have so many family members where I've realized that like they only love me, they only accept me if I'm behaving in a certain manner. And if I step outside of that box, they do not treat me well. And I've finally realized they're just not going to be in my life moving forward, because I shouldn't have to behave a certain way. I shouldn't have to keep my feelings to myself about the past and things that have happened and shut my mouth and be silent about things for me to be accepted by others. I shouldn't also have to pretend like you haven't hurt me in the past in order to keep the peace. I'm not going to pretend like everything's okay when you've been kind of a shitty person to me in the past. I'm not going to just pretend like we're good friends now. Like, thankfully, I've gotten to the point where I love myself enough that, yes, I can still love you, but I love me more. I love me more. And I am important too. And you make me feel shitty in your presence. So why am I in your presence more than I need to be? And that is going to come up for you as you start to build that self-love muscle. You are going to start to realize, where am I masking? Where am I people pleasing with people in my life? And is it worth doing it anymore? Or can I find people in my life who love me exactly as I am, and I don't have to perform for them. I don't have to be people pleasers for them. I can be my authentic self and they still love me. So that is a hard part of this. So I didn't want to exclude, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that might happen, and that's okay. As we begin to love ourselves, our relationships are going to change. They are, because sometimes we had relationships in earlier years that benefited from our lack of loving ourselves. Also, I did want to offer that one thing that I told you I did for myself in the mirror. So this is just a quick practice. If you want to go look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, I choose you. I choose you even if no one else does. Look yourself in the eyes. I love you, and I choose you even if nobody else does. And maybe repeating it multiple times. So hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you want to go deeper on your healing journey, there are many different ways to connect. So you can purchase a copy of my book, Don't You Dare, on Amazon. If you want to dive into the ego voice or into shadow work, I think it's a beautiful tool for that. I also have my most loved meditation bundle available for purchase. I also have a new course called the Affirmation Reset course. It helps us to rewire negative thinking and negative beliefs. I also offer one-on-one coaching and hypnotherapy services. If you're interested in a session, please visit my website, meganshirey.com. That's how you spell it, MAGANSHIREY.com. All of these things will all be on my website, but they will also be linked below. Some platforms are going to have one link where if you click on that link, it'll show you all of the things, but other platforms are going to have a link for each individual one. I also teach a free live guided meditation every Sunday morning on the Insight Timer app at 10 Eastern, 9 Central, 8 Mountain, 7 Pacific. And please also join us on Patreon for guided meditations, behind the scenes reflections, and a soft healing community space. And if you enjoy these episodes, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and please leave us a review. It helps us to reach more listeners. May you be happy, may you be well, may you be joyous and at ease, sending you infinite love and light. And until next time.